Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I want to advise everyone that this video and audio is being recorded. Thank you for joining Canadian Voices for Palestinian Rights on today's webinar. I do want to make a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are living and working on the traditional territory of the Aduanadaren, also known as the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We are situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 16 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. Canadian Voices for Palestinian Rights is a nonpartisan community group based in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It aims to create awareness of the effects of the Israeli military occupation on Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the lack of equality for Palestinians living in Israel, and the enduring statelessness of Palestinian refugees in exile. We support justice and equality for all within the frameworks of human rights, international humanitarian law, and United Nations resolutions. Through its advocacy and educational activities, the group denounces all barriers and oppression created by racism, discrimination, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and colonialism. We are grateful for all those who have donated to CVPR so we can continue to have these important informative webinars. Without your help, we cannot continue our constant efforts to promote justice with these forums. I have a few announcements I'd like to make. First, I'd like to introduce our board members. Myself, Robert Fantina. Maisa.
Hi, I'm Maisa Mustafa.
Kathy Bergen there, and Mamoun.
Hi, my name is Mamoun Yanis.
Okay, thank you. We'd ask that everybody put their microphones on mute and turn their cameras off. That's for better reception. Our speaker will present for about 40 to 45 minutes, after which there'll be a short 5-minute break. During the presentation, feel free to submit questions in the chat room. We will receive those questions during the presentation and afterwards, and then we will ask them at the end of the presentation when we regroup after that short break. I'll now turn the time over to Mamoun to introduce our speaker. Mamoun.
Thank you, Bob. Dr. Basel Ghattas is a Palestinian politician and a prominent community activist from Rameh, which is a Palestinian town in the Upper Galilee. Basel received his PhD in environmental engineering from the Technion, and later had his MBA from Northwestern Business School. For more than 12 years, he led the Galilee Society, an NGO involved in the health and environmental issues with the Palestinian Arab community in Palestine in 1948. In 2007, he established Malakom, the only business magazine focused on the Palestinian community in Palestine 1948. In 2013, Dr. Ghattas was elected for parliament on the National Democratic Assembly Party's list, known as Balad. During his work as a Knesset member, he focused, among other issues, on Palestinian prisoners' rights. Dr. Ghattas decided to use his immunity as a Knesset member to provide mobile phones to Palestinian political prisoners who are deprived the basic rights to call their families. The Israeli security forces filed a legal case against him with serious accusations of supporting terror and terrorists and harming state security. He faced a maximum of 10 years imprisonment. He resigned his position and was imprisoned for 2 years with other Palestinian political prisoners. Dr. Ghattas, we are very pleased and honored to have you with us today while we are addressing Al-Nakba and the continuous struggle of Palestinian people. The floor is yours, Dr. Basel. Tfadal.
Thank you very much. It's good morning to you all, or almost good morning. Of course, we are at now afternoon or evening, even in Palestine. the title is states that the Nakba is actually continuing, and most symbolic would be that now we are talking in the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, while Israel is actually launching a war against Gaza. And as you know, it's almost every second year that our people in Gaza Strip, which is the most dense area in the world, 2-point-something million Palestinians live in less than 300 square meters. And every day there is killing of Palestinian civilians, families, construction or the demolishing of homes by air missiles, etc., which is becoming to the world, unfortunately, that this is being accepted almost, with the Israeli claim that they are murdering or killing, shooting terrorists. Israel succeeded all the time in being, I said that over the Knesset in one of my speeches in the Knesset, that Israel is playing the role of David and Goliath together at the same time. And unfortunately, the world is sometimes, or most of the time, by this Israeli narrative that they are defending themselves. Israel normally, when they play or put the hat of Goliath, they claim that they have the best air force in the world. And they are using it now against civilians in Gaza, in the most dense populated area of Rafah, of Khan Yunis and Gaza. I don't know how such a powerful army and state is defending itself actually against civilians who live in the most poorest situation and conditions that the United States by itself defined Gaza Strip as area with minimal or even zero living conditions. This is our actually story with the colonial Israel as colonial entity, which we are still facing. It's not colonial project that is ended, and that you are now just facing the consequences of the colonial project. It is continuing colonial project. It's true that in 48, Israel has been established in part of Palestine. And if I should remind you that there was a division according to the UN resolution in Palestine, but the Israel borders in 48, it exceeded what is designated for Israel as the state of the Jews by almost 50%. All the Galilee area and many other areas has been occupied by the Israeli army. That time it wasn't army, it was militias. And annexed to the Israel that has been recognized by the UN member states, while its borders were not illegal. When we say occupation or occupied territories, we relate to the to the areas of the West Bank and Gaza. While actually, if we want to be strict to the legal, international legal discourse, also part of Israel 48 is being occupied territories. And nobody opened this issue. All the Palestinian struggle later on, mainly and basically after 67 war, was to get to stop the Israeli occupation for the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Nobody opened the old files of 48 and actually for the 47 files. This brings back to the table actually open issues from the Nakba, the original Nakba in 48. Issues of refugees that nobody, even nowadays, when people talk about peace process, the peace process, many important and key issues are wiped from the table, like the refugees, the right of the return, and the resources, the water resources. Many strategic issues is being left over. We want peace process. And, you know, under the American administration of Trump, and with what was called the century deal or century agreements, it was officially removed from the table. Unfortunately, with the acceptance or with the support of some Arab states. Another most important issue that even to Palestinian friends or friends of Palestinian issues also was, I can't say removed from the table, but was forgotten, that 20% of the population of Israel itself are Palestinians who got the Israeli citizenship. And of course, at that time, getting the Israeli citizenship for the whole population was a very important tool to stay in their lands and on their villages and towns and cities. So they accepted the Israeli citizenship, which was enforced on them. Okay, on one hand, many people relate to it as a huge achievement, but also this has been re-questioned in the last decade or so. That okay, we are Israeli citizens, but this citizenship has been imposed on us. We didn't choose to be Israeli citizens. We are indigenous people. That the state has been established on our homeland. Okay, we accepted the Israeli citizenship, but something should compensate for that. Israel governments over the years had done exactly the opposite. Said, oh, you should thank God that we gave you we granted you our citizenship. And you should be satisfied with that. You should thank us for that. Don't ask for your civil rights or national. You don't have any national rights. And 2 years ago, the Knesset has issued a new law, basic law, called the law of the nation, that legally has defined Israel as the state of the Jews, and that there is only one nation in Israel. We has been removed from being a national collective. We are non-Jews individuals, non-Jews citizens. Yeah, this has had legalized our second or third class citizenship. I can't go to the court now and claim for full equality in certain matters because you are not Jew. I mean, the judges can use this law, discriminatory law, being a basic law in the country. When we are using in recent years the term apartheid regime, people relate again only to the West Bank, to the occupied territories in the West Bank. But formally and eventually, the apartheid regime starts from within Israel. There are different patterns of apartheid. I agree that the apartheid under the military regime and military aggression, daily aggression in the West Bank is different from the pattern of apartheid within Israel. But we are victims of apartheid regime inside the state that I carry its citizenship. And it's almost, I don't want to say impossible, but it's very hard to explain this to the world, that there are Arab Palestinian collective inside Israel having the Israeli citizenship, but suffering from institutional, legal, practical, economical discrimination. And this is important because Israel again sell to the world its image of being the only democracy in the Middle East. You heard this again and again and again all over the years. The villa, or what Barak, the prime minister, passed the last, previous prime minister called, we are the villa in the jungle. Israel is the villa, and all the Arab world is the jungle. And what about us? Where are we located in the villa? Perhaps we are not downstairs or in the backyard of the villa, servants for the masters of the villa. So it's important to raise these issues because it's another very important arguments in this long and continuous, struggle against the Israeli the injustices in the whole Palestine, and not only in the West Bank and Gaza. I'm sure that you are following the issue of what is called the uprising of Israeli Jews against what is defined as the attempt to revise the legal system in Israel, which is Netanyahu and his coalition attempted to do, and on continuous, very impressive actually, uprising of liberal segments of the Israeli Jewish society They are marching again and again every Saturday, and recently also Thursdays, against this legal constitutional attempt to change actually the structure of the Israeli current legal system and make it more dependent on the political on the political parties on the Knesset, in the parliament, and which is truly a claim that this will harm the independence of the legal system, mainly the Supreme Court. And again, perhaps in the observation of this in the West or globally, it look like that there is a struggle over democracy, and that there are genuine opposition, civilian opposition among the Israeli Jews to this attempt to actually to narrow the independence of the legal system. And we are being frequently asked why the Arabs in Israel, the Palestinian Arabs in Israel, who are the first to be harmed by these changes or reforms, is the Netanyahu call it reforms, which actually are not reforms. They are deep changes in the division of powers. Again, to make the legal authority being more dependent on the executive or the government. So why the Arabs, the Palestinians, are not participating on those very impressive marches and demonstrations all over the country? And we try to explain, of course, that this is, for us, it looks like a struggle between parts of the Jewish community on how to divide the cake, while we are totally out of the game. And if you notice that those demonstrations are done with, tens of thousands of Israeli flags, which don't speak to us. The Israeli flag reflects, the most historical symbols of Judaism and has been revived from the Bible in order to show the historic relation between the Jews in general and Palestine. We don't feel belong to this struggle, as if we are not there. We don't feel that the Supreme Court currently is good, or is good enough, or is fair, or has treated us individually as citizens or collectively as a minority with the liberal concepts or approach. Actually, the Supreme Court is the most efficient protective tool for the Israeli system. The first and major argument of those who protest now against the Benjamin Netanyahu government attempts use this claim that the Israeli Supreme Court actually is the best defender of Israel against potential, allegations in international courts. And everybody knows that once the Supreme Court is being conceived as very independent, very that it's using all fair treatment of the army, of what's going on the occupied territories, would minimize the possibility to take Israeli generals, for example, or commanders or pilots now, and accuse them in war crime on those international courts. This is the major motive, you can say, for those protesters. For us, and for us not only as Palestinians, citizens of Israel, but for us as Palestinian people, the Supreme Court was the most, they actually approved a priori or de facto, has given, have legitimized all Israeli war crimes over the years, have given legitimacy to all land confiscation inside Israel over the years. 95% of the lands that we own has been confiscated by various laws over the years. And when we went to the court, we have been rejected by the Supreme Court, by this Supreme Court. So all these contradictions and the allegations of the right, extreme right in Israel, that the Supreme Court is pro-Palestinian, or even the Minister of Justice in Israel, in his speech to the right-wing protesters, he said that the Supreme Court support terrorists. And this brings me to the main, the current situation inside Israel that allows or permits the establishment of such extreme right religious government, where, and it's unbelievable that Netanyahu become the left side of his government. And actually he was a little bit nervous because of that. But all other groups or other parties who joined this government are to his right. And they are either the real religious, classic religious parties, or the Zionist religious party with the two fascist leaders, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who, if they have been elected to parliaments, not ministers, but even elected to parliaments in any Western country, would have been considered as fascists or even neo-Nazis. They are now ruling the country. And Netanyahu, to continue he is very much dependent on them. He cannot, they are ruling actually. They are putting the lines of this government. And Netanyahu is being captured. Not that he is that real peace seeker leader, but even this is just to show you the extent of deterioration of the political situation in Israel. And if you want to perhaps understand that better, I see it that it's natural development. You cannot have a state, supposedly democratic state, with liberal values, after 50 years of direct occupation of 5 million Palestinians, imposing on them military regime, depriving their rights, their basic rights, every day, every single day. Palestinians suffer from brutal Israeli occupation. Thousands and thousands of prisoners. Now, every month, few hundreds are being arrested in different Palestinian cities and refugee camps in the West Bank. So how such a regime or a structure, state structure, could continue being democratic while practicing such a brutal colonial apartheid regime? This can't happen. It's very natural that the whole society, Israeli Jewish society, go to the right all the time. And this is what we saw happening over the last few decades. Even the word left, what was supposed to be left in the Israeli political system had been doing everything in the last few years just to defend themselves that we are not left, which is the Labour Party or others. No, we are not left, we are in the center. Well, actually, it's true. There couldn't be left in such Zionist occupational regime or structure. You can't be left having left values of social justice, of real peace, human rights, okay, and at the same time occupying other people's land, actually settling on their land. It's not that you are occupying like the classical colonial in the history of Britain or other countries, France. No, they are coming, occupying, and saying to them, you are staying. We are taking your land. We are building new settlements every day. Such a regime, the political system can't really having balanced powers between left and right. And this is what happened also in other cases in the history, like in South Africa. In the end, the most extremist, right-wing, fascist and semi-Nazi parties will be in the power. This is the trend. This is what will happen. And I see it that Israel will not, or the political system will not being restructured or rebalanced without having external factors doing the job. You know, normally there is two ways for real dramatic change to happen. Either, you know, violent solutions, you know, the under occupation will resist, will make the life of the settlers or of the occupying power, making their life hard, making them pay the price. And this means a lot of killing and lot of blood that we know that it's not realistic on one hand, and it's not human on the other hand. We are against any killing, especially of civilians. On the second, more human option is to have the international, the world, especially the international organization, impose sanctions on Israel. These continuous double standards of the international politics when it gets to Israel should stop. And I know it's very, very hard now to think that the UN or and other governmental governments in the West impose sanctions on Israel like they did with Russia now. It's very, you know, irrational to think about it happening tomorrow. But this is again a way to struggle for BDS on Israel. And this is the most human way to think that that it would, you know, make the resolutions or the possibility of peace in the Middle East, Palestine, Israel, being more realistic. The only way is to on my mind, is to make the Israelis pay for the occupation, mainly economically and morally. And as a Knesset member, I said that clearly on the Knesset in my speeches. And I know as also scientists that how much the Israeli are sensitive to the issues of the BDS, especially the Israeli Academy. Israel ought under Netanyahu to sign with the EU under Horizon, which is a huge developmental R&D program. They signed the agreement to join Israel to this initiative, that not even one single euro from the EU goes to the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And for Netanyahu to sign this, you know, it was very, very hard. He tried by all means to bypass or to escape that. Just telling you that even a right-wing government ought to sign such a formal declaration or formal agreement, formal contract with the EU, that settlements in the West Bank are illegal, actually. So the overall, us, the Palestinians, with our friends, at least after 75 years of continuous Nakba, I claim, we have to seek a direction that maximize our impact. And to maximize our impact, we have to leverage our strong points. And we have many strong points, which are being alienated or are not being used, are being left, and all the concentration goes now, especially after Oslo, on the Palestinian Authority, which is actually authority under occupation. Very far, the reality is very far from what the Palestinians signed on Oslo Accord. Actually, this is by itself the results, the consequences of Oslo is by itself another Nakba. If we had once a national dream of having a state, an independent Palestinian state on Palestine, 25 years after Oslo, we know that this is impossible. This is illusion. Not anymore a dream or or national project of having a Palestinian state. So how we maximize our strong point, perhaps this is needs another 40 minutes to speak about, and we don't have that time. But if you ask me in the Q&A, I would refer to that. Thank you very much. Have I spoke 40 minutes?
You have, Dr. Basel, and we thank you. It was extremely informative, extremely interesting. We have a number of questions that came in, but we did say we would take about a 5-minute break. So we'll do that now. We'll ask everyone, all the attendees, just remain on camera or online, and in just 5 minutes we'll return with Dr. Basel for the Q&A. As I said, we have about 17 questions that have come in, and they're going to be there are some really excellent questions.
لا فكرت كمان يعني كنت اقول انه ممكن يكون معك ناس. لا طبعا مش قليل. لا
To start, Dr. Basel has rejoined. Are you ready to start, Dr. Basel? You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Basel. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, additional questions have come in your absence. So I'm going to start at the beginning and kind of filter out those that are duplicates. First question is, what are the pros and cons of having Palestinians in the Knesset?
You know, this I will answer one by one, or we'll have few questions. And
if you answer one by one, I'm going to, any that are similar, I'm going to kind of group together. So this is just okay. One question.
This is almost immortal question that is being discussed very often among Palestinians, especially Palestinian parties and political powers, whether we should go or run for the Knesset, participate in the political game of Israel or not. And there are a few or many actually arguments in the sake of continue playing the game of the Israeli politics, not because we will have being influential in the Israeli policy or in the Israeli Zionist regime priorities, for example, or we can suddenly will have the power to change the Israeli government or to constitute Israeli government, but rather that our voice, our political struggle, being magnified in the while you are being elected by your own people to represent them in the Knesset. This is what I felt in those 4 years that I had been doing my job as Knesset member. I felt all the time that I'm actually a messenger. I'm doing my best to defend my people's rights, to bring it to the stage, to talk about all atrocities of the governments, all the discriminatory, unhuman practices against unrecognized villages that Israel want to demolish in the south, in the Nakbah, or in the north. All that demolishing of homes that they call it illegal. We call it unauthorized, or simply because we couldn't take a license to build. Why? Because Israel planning authorities didn't do enough in planning and zoning of our towns and cities, etc., etc. So I wasn't playing that role with the illusion of the ability to influence the Israeli political system or to make it more left. All this left-right again game in the Israeli context, we were not part of that. At least I'm talking on my party, Balad. We didn't dream, or we didn't want even to be part of this game left-right. That's why historically we didn't support or went to recommend for the Israeli, this is one of the Israeli basic political issues, that after the election, the president of Israel meets with all the elected parties and ask them who they recommend to him to appoint as candidate for the prime ministership. Okay, and we didn't ever supported anybody. We didn't put ourselves in a position to say Gantz or Lapid are better than Netanyahu. For us, they are the same. So we tried, and we proved that it's possible that you participate in the Israeli political game, you run for the election, you bring to the stage your issues, you politicize all your narrative or your discourse, and there are red lines we are not ready to cross. For example, we don't participate on delegations that goes from the Knesset to visit abroad other parliaments, and being, by this you will be part of the Israeli propaganda, for example. Or we don't participate in anything that relates to security. And there are many, in the parliament, there are many committees and subcommittees like that. We succeeded in showing or in proving that this is possible. Once we feel that this is not possible anymore, and that the negative parts or negative points of being running to the Knesset are now heavier or more important than the positive side, I think we will call for boycotting the election. But we are not there yet.
Thank you. Your response ties into a couple of other questions that received, so I'm going to skip down to those. The question that came in is, what is the attitude of Palestinians living in Israel, quote unquote, toward the elections? 20% of the population is Arab. What is the attitude toward elections that occur in Israel?
What is our attitude?
Yes, that's the question
So,
that came in.
Yeah, this is similar to the previous question.
Right,
Yeah.
certainly related to that.
But perhaps here some important information. And normally people say you are 22% of the population, you can get 24 seats in the parliament. Okay, and here two important facts should be mentioned. One is that among those who have the election right and those who are 18 years old and above, we are not 20%. We are hardly 15%. Why? Because we are very young population. If you compare it to the Jews, we are perhaps, and this is a fact, that we are only 15–16% of those who have the right to elect. Another important piece of information is that the Arabs don't go to the polls. Hardly 50–55%. While among Israeli Jews, the percentage goes up to 70–75%. And again, this is very hard to explain how, depressed, alienated population, instead of going by much larger percentage to the polls in order to affect their destiny, to influence their situation, why they sit at home? Why they almost half of them don't go to? And this is, again, this is a very, very complicated issue. But again, it goes back to the basic fact that we don't feel actually belonging to, and many out of negligence, out of don't feel that this is really affect their daily life. We go to for example, municipality elections by 90%. Why? Because people feel that having their friend being elected, or their list of families, there is also family issues there. But going to the national election, which is much more actually important, we still struggling over the 50–55%.
Thank you. Another question, again, it's a combination of a few. How do we work to counter the Israeli narrative of a tiny state, vulnerable in the face of Arab neighbors and so on? You mentioned before the David and Goliath analogy that Israel fosters as historical victims seeking home. This comes from the state of Israel on so many fronts, when access to the truth as is happening in Palestine is so tightly controlled by the state. How do we counter that narrative? And when that narrative is repeated and grows exponentially through tourism, the media, political rhetoric, the fight against anti-Semitism, how can the Israeli narrative be countered, best be countered?
Well, I think I tried to do that all my 40-minute talk.
Certainly.
Actually, just presenting the facts. That's reflecting the current situation. Who is occupying who? I don't think that there are anybody who can argue that there is justice in Palestine and that the situation is good and the Palestinian enjoys, equality, enjoy basic human rights, enjoy a very good economic situation, etc. I think only even Zionists can't say that. Even supporters of Israel cannot. So just reflecting on the situation and showing what happened. I don't want even to go back to 48, okay? In order to encounter Israeli narrative, you don't need to go back to the 48. Just showing what's happening under occupation. That there is a lot of UN Security Council resolutions and UN other, the Human Rights Council resolutions. What's happening? Why those hundreds of resolutions hasn't been respected? While in the issue of Russia and Ukraine, all the world rushed in order to decide on sanctions on Russia. So the double standards. I don't think that the problem is on countering or finding arguments to encounter. I think the issue more relies on how we do that. Given the situation of the media, given the situation that Israel succeeded, also because of the issue of the Holocaust, the feeling of the especially European countries that they have moral issues with the Jews in general, and the support of Israel was taken for granted over the years. There we should be more creative, more efficient, more seeking and thinking out of the box how we do that.
Thank you. Next question: is there a Palestinian leader who could emerge as a successor to Mahmoud Abbas, who is no friend of the Palestinian people?
Excuse me?
The question is there a Palestinian leader who could emerge as a successor to Mahmoud Abbas, who is no friend of the Palestinian people?
This, again, this part of the problem. We are the Palestinian issue. I didn't talk about that because, again, it's by itself. I need separate lecture just to reflect on that, how the impasse, the crisis of the Palestinian political system now. And this, of course, I relate to it as part of the Oslo Accord consequences, that the PLO is almost paralyzed, which was our national unity organization. And instead of it, now the dominant player is the PA, the Palestine Authority, Palestinian Authority, which is subject now to being dominated by the occupation. I don't use normally, the terms which are not political. I can't say that they are traitors or that they are occupation agents, etc. The people talk about that on the street, but I can't use such terms. But it's clearly they are not independent Palestinian leadership who can stand for the Palestinian rights and can negotiate with Israel as equal powers. They are related, they are dependent on what's called the security a collaboration with Israel. In order to move from one city to other city, they need VIP licenses. So they are in every single benefit, they need the endorsement or the approval or to be satisfactory to the Israeli occupation power. So even I don't think, actually seriously, I'm not worried who will, be successor of Abbas, because worse than this situation, I don't expect we will get. The whatever happens after Abbas will either, perpetuate the current situation, or will make a new perhaps thinking or a new different leadership shuffle, which would be that to the better. But it's not an issue for us. The main issue is how the Palestinian people, with their, as I said, with their friends, with their supporters, really leverage or get and think, really, all of us think out of the box, how we can make our strong points, how we utilize it, how we leverage it, how we bring it to the front as a real influential factor.
Thank you. The next question is quite long. I'm going to paraphrase it. It concerns accountability for Israel being held accountable. And it seems, question is, how is this accountability done when there's no organization currently that will do it? Not the UN, not the ICC, and no countries in the West. It says there's no one willing to help the Palestinians, and not even Iran, who are the only ones who are helping them at all. How do we remove the veto power in the United Nations from the US and to hold Israel accountable? And can China and Russia assist with any of this? Kind of a long and complex question.
Can you summarize it again for me?
Yeah,
what?
How can Israel be held accountable for its war crimes when the UN won't do it, the ICC isn't doing it, and the US and other countries aren't sanctioning Israel? So how can that accountability be held, and can China and Russia in any way assist with holding Israel accountable for its crimes?
Well, this is the major obstacle, or the major challenge, of course. And I think only by believing on our vision, our goal, fighting for our rights in all means, especially the civil and democratic tools that we have. Everybody in his location, in his community, including you in Canada, and we can also learn from history. I remember reading an interview with Bishop from South Africa, just skipped my mind his name, who was, the symbol of the anti-apartheid struggle, who was invited to the White House under Reagan. And when he claimed or asked for the US to support sanctions on the apartheid regime, he said, I was almost kicked out from the White House, and it took perhaps 2 decades or more of civil struggle all over the world by the people, by the demonstrations. You remember that period until the governments ought to change their attitude toward the apartheid regime. Now, I don't have the illusions that that would be easy for us to do or to repeat that experience, because still, in my mind, Israel, harder case to be held accountable for its crimes than the apartheid racist regime in South Africa. Again, because starting for our location in the Middle East, which is very close to Europe, we are the Holy Land, we are the Jews and what happened with the Jews in the Holocaust. Any criticism, not sanctions, even the slightest criticism of Israel, you could be easily labeled as anti-Semitic or etc. We know all that, but still we have to consistently work in this direction. What other choices what we have? One, to have civil resistance among Palestinians under occupation, and to have civil actions all over the world in order to hold Israel accountable for its crime. This is the way.
You mentioned civil disobedience, and part of that is making the occupation, any occupation, as difficult for the occupiers as possible. But with Abbas's security coordination with Israel, how can civil disobedience succeed?
You know, I learned not to give advices for the victims how to. The Palestinians are the extent of suffering, the extent of and the level of unhuman conditions that terms the majority of the people only seek one thing: to live, to survive, to work and bring home food. Okay, you can't tell them don't go to Israel for work, don't bring home decent income in order to feed your children. Why? Because we have this national campaign of civil disobedience. I believe that, all resistant movements against colonialism over the years, okay, they had this ups and downs. There's no one case that, people worked, whole people were active and actively involved in resisting the occupation. Otherwise, why colonialism continued centuries? Centuries of struggle, of victims, of martyrs, all over that's why I wish we could be more resistant, more efficient, okay, in our struggle with the occupation. But Israel is practicing not just brutal, humiliating occupation daily against us, but also they are so powerful in managing or in the crisis management and occupation management, okay, that they have succeeded in maneuvering or making the Palestinians maneuver between their basic issues, daily life issues, and political struggle.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that there are Palestinian strong points that can and should be leveraged but aren't fully being utilized. So the question is, can you tell us what those points are.
Well, I think the major point one is our people, our human resources. We are highly educated people. You know, the fact, the tragedy that we are now dispersed all over the world, like once the Jews were, could be also a strong point, or the major strong. Now, as if in the struggle powers, you have Israel with all its enormous powerful resources, economy, security, science, research, okay? On the other hand, you have the 5 million Palestinians under occupation, okay? Once the PLO enjoyed massive global support when especially under the Cold War between the West and the Soviet Union and all the social democratic. Now we are alone against Israel. At least we have to bring to our side all our people with us, not just the 5. To start with the Palestinians in Israel. Okay, we are almost 2 million, and we enjoy a better situation, economic situation, movement freedom, and all other Palestinians in diaspora and in the refugee camps. How can we work together? How we can maximize our impact? How we can talk to the West? How we can bring our people very real roadmap toward freedom, toward decolonization of the whole region? This is what we should be talk about. That's why it's important to bring all of us together at one event or one yearly, annual activity. All those, even Palestinian powers, who are now part of the problem, will not be eager to bring other or to widen the sphere of political movement among Palestinians. Or they have their own chair or their own position. They will not give it easy to others, and we should not actually this civil, I hope, interaction should not. I'm not leading something. I'm just praying or expressing my dream or my vision. Shouldn't come into a direct contradiction with any other player on the ground. Not with the PA, not with the PLO, not with the Islamic movements. We will bring all our people organizations to such civil meeting, conference, congress, annual, and speak to the world and try to think, as I said, we have to think out of the box. We have to create potential, even moral direction.
Thank you again. I have time for maybe one or two more questions. You mentioned in your talk about how when Donald Trump was president, he certainly marginalized the Palestinian people more so than previous administrations had done. Now, today, polls are showing that in the United States, Democratic voters are more supportive of Palestine and Palestinians than they are of Israel.
Yeah.
Why has the Biden administration not done more to support the Palestinians?
You know, this shift which is happening, gradually happening, especially among mainly actually among the Democratic Party bases of supporters, is very good, actually. It's very promising as well. But yet still not that much with impact on the current administration. It perhaps will take years until this shift among the American public become real impact and real influence on the American, foreign policy, especially the partnership actually with Israel. You can ask the same with the Barak administration, who he by far he supported Israel more than all Republican presidents. He has signed an agreement of $40 billion support to Israel over 10 years or something. So in order to translate such change or shift on the basis of a party, to translate it to influence on who is the candidate or who are elected in the parliament, in the Congress, under the pro-Israel lobby is still very powerful in the States. It didn't change that easily. At the same time, you could see more in-depth phenomena like what's happening in the American campuses. Almost in all American campuses now, the BDS supporters are the leaders or are leading by far. So hopefully, also in Europe, in my recent tours in Europe, when I was in the parliament, I saw that the new generation in Europe is free from their of their parents' generation issue with the Holocaust. They are not, living this Nazi and the Holocaust issue. They more are based and linked to the human rights discourse. And they see that there is double standards when it gets to Israel. So again, it will take a few years, perhaps a decade or two even, in order to this to be translated in positions in the governments.
Thank you. Last question, and then we'll turn time over to Maisa for some closing comments. How much is, you mentioned Israel calling itself a democratic society. How much is that myth believed outside of Israel's borders and outside of US government circles? The myth of Israel as a
Israel is democracy. It's formal democracy. It's formal democracy. There is a shift in the power. People goes to the polls. Parties are elected. Okay, so in that sense, you can't argue that Israel is a dictatorship. Okay, but democracy is not only about election. It's not only about a majority and minority. It's much more deeper than that. It's the values that this democracy is based on. Does it respect human rights, rights of minorities, etc., etc.? So, also in this encountering this issue of Israel is the only democracy, again we have to show how much it's false democracy, or it's very or it's democracy only for the Jews. Mm-hmm. We had this saying when they said Jewish democratic Israel is Jewish democratic state. we say it can't be Jewish and democratic at the same time. We say it's Jewish to the Arabs and democratic to the Jews. This is how we understand this Jewish democratic state. I don't hear you. You are unmute.
Thank you for your comments and your responses. I'll turn the time over to Maisa for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Thank you very much, Dr. Basel Ghattas. You are so generous with your answers, in addition to your presentation, which was deep, comprehensive, clear, sharp, and at the same time, very critical. I think you managed to push us to think critically about things that sometimes are so normalized in the narratives about Palestinian question and about the Israeli way they present their state, they present their narrative and claims. So thank you very much, because I think by listening to you, we are able now to have actually the right questions rather than having the answers about the Palestinian question and what to do, where to focus the lens, and how to act as activists, as people who really care for the Palestinian struggle, and try to, as you mentioned in the title of your presentation, try to focus on the tools that can bring justice to the Palestinian people. And I think you were very generous with your analysis, where you took us back to history and focused on those major facts that are related to the Palestinian questions, that highlights that Israel is occupying part of historic Palestine, in addition to what the world always focus on, West Bank and Gaza, at the same time talking about the millions of Palestinian refugees who are forgotten, even that they have internationally recognized resolution adopted by the United Nations regarding their right of return. So I think it's very important to keep remembering those facts about the Palestinian question and the Palestinian issues, in order to be able to, as you mentioned, to think about the ways to utilize and actually bring those strength elements regarding the Palestinian struggle against the Israeli narrative. And I think you were very clear about the importance of BDS, the importance of bringing this narrative about the Palestinian people, the role of Palestinian people. And you were also able to highlight the lack of accountability in the international community with regards to the acts and crimes that Israel conduct on a daily basis with regards to the Palestinian. So I will make it short. I would like to thank you very much for this really amazing, informative analysis that you provided our participants with. And I would like to encourage our participants to keep an eye on Canadian Voices for Palestinian Rights Facebook page. And also we will make sure that we will upload the recording of this presentation and discussion on our YouTube page, where you can go back to it, because I think we need to listen to it again and again to keep those facts in our mind, and to have this clear vision that you shared with us today about the Palestinian struggle towards liberation and justice. We would like to have you again, Dr. Ghattas, and hopefully once in person here in Canada, where we can welcome you in Kitchener-Waterloo and have the chance to meet together and talk about those continuous big questions, but at the same time, clear vision about the way forward. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for being with me.